104.7 The Cave. KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
Yes, it is. We are back in the studio for another round of Ned Talk. I am Joe Westen, joined as always by Ned Reynolds. Ned, how are you today?
Doing just great, thank you. It is a beautiful day in the Ozarks and always beautiful when the Chiefs are about to play.
Oh, absolutely fabulous. And we're joined in the studio today by our resident Chiefs fanatic, Mike the Intern. Mike, how are you?
Hola, senor.
Yeah, so Chiefs off to a great start last week.
Hell yeah.
Let's talk about the game. I really thought the Texans would give them a better battle than what they did. But they, we talked about this last week in the show that the Texans had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Ned, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, the score is very misleading. It should have been about 34-7. It was garbage time at the end of the game, and Houston picked up those, the extra points. Houston's not all that bad a team. I think the fact is that Kansas City is that good a team. That was really a coasting performance on Kansas City's part. They dominated virtually every aspect of it, although Houston was in the lead. They were in the lead last year, too, 24-0, and that didn't last. So I think probably you saw a vintage Kansas City Chiefs performance. I think probably what opened most eyes was that here there are no preseason games, and Kansas City looks at midseason form. And one of the reasons for that, of course, it is a veteran team accustomed to Andy Reid's scheme of things, and they were able to come out and just play the way they have been. Houston's also a veteran team, but they were missing some key individuals there. They're really, I think, a lot better than what they showed. We'll see what happens as the weeks go on. We're looking at some games right now that are hugely surprising to me, especially Atlanta and Dallas. Good gracious.
I kind of like these late afternoon kickoff times for the Chiefs so we can kind of get a feel for the way the league's going early on, watching the noon games while we get to sit in here and talk. But to piggyback on what you said, and it was something we talked about last week, there were a couple teams that you could see across the league that preseason wouldn't have mattered. Chiefs are one. Ravens were another one. The guys that were able to retain the people from last year and just kind of take that next step. You could see it across the league. You can see missteps against teams that are young that, that could have definitely benefited from 4 games. But luckily for us, or at least the kingdom, the Chiefs didn't seem to be affected by that, at least in week 1.
It was a tale, really, of two teams because the Texans did look like a team that could use preseason football. They seemed to be just out of step. A lot of passes low, a lot of cuts and breaks not going the right way. And, again, I was a little bit surprised. I thought the Texans would give them a better game.
Well, Deshaun Watson showed some rust as far as I'm concerned. He did not look smooth. And, of course, our local guy, Dylan Cole, wasn't even in there. He's on the at least one for that game, anyway, on the injured list and was out. But when you have a circumstance where you have key injuries like that, your whole rhythm is going to be disrupted. The cohesiveness of the team is going to be displaced. And I think that's really what did happen to Houston. Again, I think they're a better team from what they showed. But I also think the Chiefs are a better team from what they showed. And they were pretty damn good.
Yeah, especially kind of on the defensive side. And that was something else we talked about last week is the secondary, especially in the defensive side of the ball, is going to really have to catch up quickly because that's really where preseason shines. And that's part of what I think you're talking about, especially with the Chiefs, like the secondary. So it's interesting. The other thing that's kind of disconcerting, at least to me, especially since I do play fantasy football, is the injuries so far across the league. Because kind of noticed that it seems to be a lot of injuries this early on in the season,
and that is the one factor.
Yeah,
the one factor that the Chiefs have to worry about because it's a variable that you can't predict. Don't know what's going to happen. And Kansas City is a deep team, but are they deep enough to have some key personnel out? Maybe it won't happen. God forbid that it does. But the fact of the matter remains it is part of pro football and part of any sport for that matter. And you have to guide your team and you have to develop them to where you do have individuals who can come in as at least able replacement, maybe not as duplicate replacement, but certainly as able ones.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. We are your local live sports broadcast show, and we have we'll take you up to 2 o'clock this afternoon when Art Haynes and Mitch Holtis will take over with the Chiefs pregame show and kickoff for the game. I think it is
3:20.
3:20 will be kickoff as they take on the L.A. Chargers. I didn't say that wrong, Ned. I said it right.
No, but I was going to dock you $10 if
You're
you
about,
did.
about ready.
Now for a bonus question, what's the name of the new stadium everyone's just gushing over?
So high. So
it is
high.
gorgeous.
Is it
Do
so
I
high?
get $10 for that?
Don't be looking at me.
Joe, I do want to tell you, we are going to have a special guest on the show, too, coming up in just a short time. And, it's not often that we're able to, on this portion of the pregame show, have a former Chiefs all-time great with us, but we will today.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good conversation. I cannot wait to tell him that when I played Tecmo Bowl on Nintendo, he was the kicker for the Chiefs. And every time they kicked the field goal or the extra point, it ran across the bottom, and I didn't want to give it away. I was trying to still stay in the tease, but I can't wait to say that. I'm going to fanboy on them for that one, big time.
Were you, either one of you, surprised at how much the Chiefs featured the run last week?
I'm not really, just considering that I think had the history been a little bit different with certain personnel for the Kansas City Chiefs, had that person stayed with the team, you would have probably seen
nameless with people now.
I just don't really like to talk about Kareem that much because this breaks my heart. But the thing is, Reed I think likes to run that type of game if he can run that type of game. And the last couple seasons, it's been by committee. Now towards the end of the season, we had Williams step up, and it was just unbelievable. It did a great job. Well, he's out this year, so if he has it, I think seeing Reed able to have it and use it, I'm not surprised by it at all because he likes to play that type of football when he can.
Interestingly enough about the Chiefs, they are not a gadget team. There's really nothing surprising about what they run. A little misdirection, but heck, that's part of the game. That's not the key point. The strong point is how they do it.
Yeah.
They are so functional, so precise in what they do, and they're so quick. Mm-hmm. And that's what the former San Diego Chargers have to watch out for today.
Were you surprised that they ran the ball as much as they did?
No, because I think Mahomes felt like, first of all, I think he wanted to give Edwards-Helaire a lot of action. He didn't have any in the preseason. There wasn't any.
Good point.
So let him get some work in there. He's probably not going to see, and I say that, he likely won't see as much action today in this game coming up. Again, it depends on how the game goes. But I think it was a test for him. Mahomes knew he didn't have to throw it. He did want to a little bit give a little variety to his receivers. You see, he divided the game. He had Hill catching, he had Kelsey catching, he had Robinson catching some. So there was a diversification to what he did, but I think it was by game plan that they were going to run more than pass.
Will you think that?
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't like when Coach Reed can do it, they're going to do it. And again, it really is. I think early on they just test the waters and see how they're going to have to play that game. And like Ned said, they're so precise, it doesn't matter what they're doing. But the fact is, now the league, especially after week one, got to see. We were a pass threat all day, but now we're a run threat. That's going to be tough to stop.
Yeah, that's something I thought too. Is the league sitting there with gasping, looking at this team and going, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do now?" And I know in the preseason, everybody talked about him being another passing option for Patrick Mahomes, but for him to run the ball as much as he did and as effectively as 140 yards.
Yeah, but all right, guys. That's good, and he was at LSU a pass-catching running back. He can run as well. I really don't think he fits the scheme as a regular running back in every game. He's not big enough. He's, 5'7". He's going to take some wallops in there before too much longer. We just saw Drew Lock knocked out of the Denver Broncos game by a solid hit, and he's a big guy. So you can imagine what Edwards-Helaire will be facing. But there are so many options on the team that they have now that it's going to – and you have to remember, too, that every team has different defensive formations that they use and all different defensive players. Like next week when Kansas City faces Baltimore, that's an altogether different scheme. So you'll look for different game plans in each and every contest.
I was going to say, or one of the things I wanted to mention about his performance, Solaire's performance last week, is how good it was and how much of a running threat that he was to the added dimension to the Chiefs this season. And then you capped it off really nicely by saying you think that's going to change week to week.
It will. I don't think it's a regular part of their game plan because every team is different. But he is in there. They can't afford to lose this guy. You don't have Damian Williams to go back on. And I'm not sure that the other running backs fit that scheme. You're looking for a power running back. Of course, they have Anthony Sherman, and what's he do? Run the ball once a year for a touchdown late in the season?
Hey, he gets it when it counts. That man is a treasure, and he gets it when it counts, and that's all that matters.
And he's there for a reason.
Absolutely.
And that reason is protect that QB, and you better doggone well do that. But he'll get his day of glory every so often. But in Edwards-Hilaire's case, good player, solid player, but you don't want to overuse him. And
No.
you guys have been around long enough to know that a pro football running back's lifespan, I don't mean that quite literally, but for effectiveness, is limited.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. There's not many guys like Walter Payton around anymore that go and go and go. And
Different game.
Yeah, completely different game.
Completely different game.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, if there's one coach that can figure out a way to protect him and use him effectively, it's Andy Reid, because he's had several small running backs over his career. He seems to like those guys.
He does.
He was an Eagles coach when Darren Sproles was in there, and, of course, the Eagles had Darren Sproles after that, too, and he's not very big, but he was not a primary running back. And Edwards-Helaire was in last week's game. That is not going to be, in my opinion, a regular part of their offense.
Let's go to one of our features that we have, and it is a new feature that we've added to the show, and it's Who's Hot, and we'll check in with Mike the Intern on that.
Who's Hot in the NFL? Brought to you by All Services Air Service on Ned Talk 104.7 The Cave.
I mean, it's my guy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. First week, I'm going to be biased. I mean, he, despite what Ned thinks is going to go future and him not being the prime, not going to run at that game plan week to week, which I kind of agree with and I can see it. But the ability to be able to rely on him and do that in week one, huge. We got to give him props. 138 yards, averages 5.5, 1 TD. Give it up to my boy.
I'm sure glad you kept it at football when he said who's hot right now.
Well, obviously it was Ned.
Yeah, Ned.
obviously
on
it's
fire.
Ned. Obviously it's Ned.
Ned is flaming.
Obviously, I think everyone already agreed on that before I even opened my mouth.
Well, there's
Obviously,
no
it's
sense
Ned.
of bringing up the obvious.
Obviously, it's
there.
Ned.
Is there anybody else in the NFL you wanted to point out? Anybody that you saw in week one you thought,
both
wow.
you guys are terrible. Elsewhere, yeah, I'll tell you, the kid who quarterbacks for the Los Angeles Rams had a very good game in his opener. That's Goff. Excuse me again. Goff has a lot of capabilities. He has his team in front of the Philadelphia Eagles today, 20-0 in the first period. So I like him, Jared Goff. He has a lot of ability, and who knows, the Rams may be a sleeper.
Anybody else? I know, Mike, you're a fantasy guy. Is there anybody else you've seen?
I mean, I tell you what, I was talking to Ned before we started. Allen for Buffalo, he's having a pretty strong year as far as QB. He's got a lot of weapons. That's going to be a definite interesting matchup for the Chiefs up here in a couple weeks when they face off with the Bills. So I've been watching him closely too, and he's on. The other thing and we can get into this when we do our fantasy later on down the line, but losing if Barkley went down too, just like I was talking about injuries, there's been a lot of significant players going down in these first couple weeks, and hopefully Barkley's okay. But I think the last thing I heard, they went in for X-rays on him, so. It's just been an interesting season so far. Also, I want to give it up to Higbee, the tight end for L.A. He's had pretty good, strong start, just like he ended the season last season too.
Oh, well, yeah. No, there's a lot of players there to talk about it. Like you said, it's been an interesting beginning to the season. I'm really thrilled that we're talking about sports and we're talking about football. We have a special guest coming up in a few minutes, so hang out for that. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Yes, we are doing Ned Talk, getting set for kickoff coming up this afternoon as the Chiefs take on the Chargers. I cannot wait. I didn't get much of a chance to look at the new stadiums last week. Did you? Either one of you guys?
Gorgeous.
It is, without question, it is an utter palace. Now, there were no fans in there for the Dallas Cowboys game with the Rams, none, but they did take some perimeter shots, and I'll tell you, think of Kroenke whatever you want because he bailed out on Missouri, but the man's design is breathtaking.
Very futuristic. It could be in an episode of Westworld or something, the way it looks like out there in big-time California.
The fountains and all that sort of thing.
Did the Raiders play at home last week, or they play on the road?
No, they play Monday night, tomorrow night.
Monday night.
Yep.
It'd be interesting to see because I've seen some exterior shots of that stadium.
I saw that going through there last summer, driving through Vegas.
It is a beautiful stadium, too. So it'd be interesting to see how everybody wraps up on this, which one wins the battle of the brand new stadiums. I know what Mike thinks already. So
SoFi all day. I think it's gorgeous. So, yeah. I mean, hatred towards the Raiders is definitely slightly more towards than the Chargers.
I have some friends here in town who are Chiefs season ticket holders and purchased tickets for the Chiefs-Raiders game in Las Vegas, and now they're not going to be able to do it. Makes them sick.
Well, Mike alluded to just a little while back that he's a big fantasy guy, so he's going to do our fantasy picks this week.
Fantasy Picks of the Week, brought to you by Fazoli's on Ned Talk, 104.7 The Cave.
As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of cool doing this as the late afternoon game because we've already seen what's going on as far as fantasy scores. But so your picks are definitely have to be locked in by now. But top QB, Lamar Jackson, second, Mahomes, which, okay, we'll see. As far as running backs, Derrick Henry in the number 1 spot, McCaffrey number 2, Zeke number 3, and Barkley was number 4. And like I mentioned, he went down. So if you started him just like I did, you're sitting about 2, and depending on your league, 2 point something, and hoping and praying he comes back out. As I mentioned, as far as the tight end game goes, Higbee, man, he had a strong finish last year, and already he's had a strong season. I got lucky and was able to pick him up in the draft, so I was really benefited from there. As far as running backs go, like I mentioned, McCaffrey and Barkley are up at the top, but Clyde Edwards came in at number 7, so not bad there. And finally, as to close out on this, I read an article this morning when I was setting my picks that said, you know what, 0-2 isn't that bad. Your season's not over if you have an 0-2 start, so don't freak out. And last week I lost by 0.05. And this week's not looking so good either. So,
Ned, let's talk about the Chargers, and what do you think Chiefs are going to see today from that team?
I'll tell you what their game plan is going to be, and it really isn't any secret. Anthony Lynn has already kind of hinted about this. Talent-wise, personnel-wise, the Chargers do not match up with Kansas City, and I really don't think any other teams other than maybe Baltimore do in the NFL. But again, it's so different. We're talking about professional football players. The Chargers will slow the game up. This is a different Chargers team from what Kansas City's seen in the past. There is no Phillip Rivers back there. It'll be Tyrod Taylor, and he will, in fact, slow the game up himself, even though he's a scrambling quarterback. He threw 30 times last week against the Cincinnati Bengals and completed 16 of them. Very poor percentage. But he does have a team that can run the ball and can slow things up. Furthermore, if the Chargers do have a particularly strong aspect about them, it is their defense. Their defensive backfield is very good. Can they put pressure on Mahomes and company? Well, if they do, then they may be shooting themselves in the foot, because once that Kansas City speed gets through any kind of pass rush at all or pressure, watch out. They're on their way. So, again, Anthony Lynn is going to want his team to slow it up, keep the offense off the field, and do what you can. The one thing that I almost said it, didn't I? Almost had to fetch out.
All the money you earned, paying it right back.
The Los Angeles can't do. They cannot get behind in this game. If they do, the game's over, especially as far as back. If they're like 20-0 down, hey, kiss it goodbye like the Houston Texans were last week. You can't give Kansas City a lead because they're going to extend it and make it a very long afternoon.
Mike, people talk about football all the time that you got to go out there and play a 60-minute game. That's a cliche. The Chiefs proved last year that it's not a true cliche. Not only did they do, if you watch them throughout the season, a lot of times we would do a Ned Talk, and they would look, maybe not look terrible, but they wouldn't look like themselves in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they would come out and obliterate a team, and it just took a quarter. Then in the Super Bowl, what was it? 6 minutes?
7 minutes.
6 or 7 minutes, where they just, that game, to me, I sat there and I was so depressed watching that game. And I thought, well, maybe next year. And then 7 minutes,
Not this
they
time.
ran them off the field. But I wanted to say this really quickly. Do you think any team can plan for the Chiefs?
I mean, okay, so before that, you're playing 60 minutes. That's games playing 60 minutes. Yes, that's true. I think that's meant don't leave anything out on the field. And it doesn't matter if the Chiefs do it in 60 minutes or 7 minutes or 20 minutes. They're doing it. They'll cram all 60 minutes into that window, and that's just the way it's going to be. As long as they can do that, I don't know. I don't know if you can.
Even though these are professional athletes, I think the NFL was a victim, so to speak, of hype. There was so much media hype about what Kansas City could do as an explosive team. I think it preyed into the psyche of some of these players. It certainly did with the 49ers, because in that one stretch in the fourth period, they were not the 49ers of the previous three quarters in that game. I think once they saw what could happen, and here's Mahomes hitting a quick touchdown and then getting the ball right back, they said, oh, my Lord, it's going to happen to us. And it did. They let it happen to them. Again, that is the product of an impact from the media and from what the teams have done in the past. Don't interrupt.
Old man hates to be interrupted.
That's because I'm talking wisdom here to you, youngsters.
Yeah. Whatever.
I got to get my pen and paper. I'm sorry, I wasn't taking notes.
I'm not. Yeah, I got to write this all.
I messed up. Sorry.
Don't misunderstand. I am not degrading what they do. The Chiefs are a very explosive football team and capable of scoring at any time.
There's validity in what he's saying, and I get it. And I, even as rabid of a fan as I am, I understand his point of view. I mean, obviously, I'm never going to admit that openly to anyone at any time, but I see his point, and he's right, because it's kind of like at the end of the Karate Kid. How does a crane drop this kid? There's no way. But the hype of what was happening in that moment, he wasn't able to get above the hype and do what he had to do. And the 49ers just, he's right. They just collapsed.
I'm completely on the other side of this from you guys, because going into that Super Bowl, I don't think the Chiefs were hyped as much as, having watched them all year long. I watched The Greatest Show on Turf. They cannot hold a candle to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, the way the Chiefs score almost
different game though. I think
almost at will.
Different time period. Even though it was only 20 years ago, it's still, I think, it was a different game in the early 2000s.
It was, and hey, Joe, that doggone team from St. Louis was pretty fast.
They were pretty fast.
Compare,
yeah.
but that's a great comparison too in the style of the game, the way the game's played now. The Chiefs are a really good comparison to that.
I would like to get the opinion of our special guest.
I would really like to get his opinion on that stuff.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes with him. First of all, though, let's get our injury report.
The Injury Report, brought to you by Morrison, Webster, and Carlton on Ned Talk, 104.7 The Cave.
Injury report, and as far as the Chiefs are concerned, Charvarius Ward will be out. He has a broken hand. He won't play, and Okafor is going to miss this one. But otherwise, the Chiefs are in pretty doggone good shape. As far as the Chargers are concerned, the big Pouncey kid, their big center, that leaves a huge void in the Los Angeles offensive line, because he is a stabilizing force. Joey Bosa, I do expect will play. He has a triceps injury, but should be able to get back into the contest and play effectively. And one of the big running backs for the Chargers is out. They're not at the same strength that Kansas City is, but they're still in pretty good stead, and they are coming off a win, although it was a bit of a lucky win for them, 16-13. over the Cincinnati Bengals, in which the game-tying field goal, did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
The kicker had a cramp in his leg, and he blew it. But, hey, there are so many amounts of good fortune that you can have during a season that anything can happen. Still, I think the Chargers are probably physically pretty good shape.
I agree with you on the Bosa thing. I think he's in. I think he just because he had a full practice on Friday, but them not having Justin Jackson definitely is not going to be easy.
That does hurt.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, tricep injury on Bosa. I think that's going to hurt his game as far as pressure on Mahomes?
No. What's going to hurt his game is the Chiefs' offensive line keeping him out of there is that's going to hurt him.
I can't wait to see it. Cannot wait to see it.
We got a special guest coming up in a little bit, so hang out for that.
104.7 The Cave, an hour before every pregame show for our own Chiefs pregame show.
Hey gang, Ned Reynolds. Join me for Ned Talk, our local Kansas City Chiefs pregame show before every Chiefs game. The B team and I will talk about our Chiefs player of the week and why he's the one to help the kingdom in the next game. Brought to you by Mid-Missouri Bank, member FDIC. Going your home for the Kansas City Chiefs, 104.7 The Cave.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Yes, Ned Talk.
A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio
You did it all
network.
day.
He paused that too long. I paused that too long. Yeah, we're a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. I am Joe Westen in the studio with Mike the Intern and our radio roustabout Ned Reynolds as we talk sports. And we're lucky today. We don't often get a guest because we have a bad reputation, but we have one today, a Chiefs legend. Ned, I'll let you introduce him.
Thank you, Joe, and absolutely right, a Chiefs legend, and the still, even after all these years, he's going to kill me for this too, after all these years, still the Chiefs' all-time leading career scorer with 1,466 points, and a nominee for the Canton, Ohio Hall of Fame next year, and we certainly hope he gets it. Great pleasure to welcome to our show Nick Lowery, Nick the Kick, who is coming to the area and will be here in probably, 25 till 2, probably about an hour is when he'll be here. Nick, thank you very much for being with us today.
Hey, Ned, you are a legend, brother, and that voice, the voice of God, I just love hearing it.
These guys will argue that with you.
No way. You're going to get no argument from us, Nick, at
I'll
all.
argue with you. Yeah.
Before we talk football, and I know, Nick, you really are high on the Chiefs. Of course, everybody is. But talk a little bit about why you're going to be here specifically in Republic, Missouri.
Well, I was called by my buddy, Dr. Peter Young, about 3.5 months ago, saying that Officer Mark Preby, a wonderful man, a police officer in Springfield, had been almost killed by a crazy. I'll just leave it at that. And I just thought, with all that's going on in the world, we've got to support the good police in this world. We just got to go out of our way for the people that put their lives on the line. And Officer Preby has been in rehab for 2 months in Colorado. We did a fundraiser about 2.5 months ago in Missouri, in Mount Vernon, and we're going to do one today. And I get to meet Mark, who just came back and was surrounded by a wonderful, very moving police escort when he landed back on Thursday last week from his time in Colorado. So we'll be at Big Whiskey's, which I love the name, and a sports bar in Republic, Missouri. And we're going to raise some money. We're going to we're going to have a raffle for at least 4 or 5 NFL footballs and a bunch of really nice Hall of Fame posters, and raise some money and also just raise the morale of a family where Officer Preby's wife also has cancer. So, it's a beautiful story, though, of the resilience of the human spirit. Officer Preby had been leading Missouri Special Olympics. He took a whole group to Dubai a year ago. His son, Connor, with all he's gone through, he was player of the game at Republic's junior high varsity game last week. So I'm just honored to be able to support this great man and his family.
We think it is absolutely great, Nick, that you are coming here for this event itself. Now, when we say coming here, folks, we're talking to you live, and Nick is on the road now. He's probably about an hour out of Republic, maybe a little bit less. But once you get there, once you get to Big Whiskey's on Old Town Road, do we assume correctly that that's when the events will all start?
Yeah, that's where the event will start, and obviously we're going to watch the Chiefs game. I'm going with 31-25 or 31-24 Chiefs over the Chargers today in the Chargers billion-dollar stadium. It won't matter because we've got Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and we got ourselves a running back, don't we?
Yeah, you're giving the Chargers 24 points. Are you kidding me? Come on, man.
We aren't.
Come on. What are you doing?
Nick, we've been dissecting the game here, and I think from a talent standpoint, at least in our opinion here, the Chargers don't even match up. But would you agree with a new quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, in there, and a whole different scheme that Anthony Lynn has put in there, that the Chargers will probably try to slow the game as much as they can?
Absolutely, and then throw in the fact that for the first time in NFL history, no team had a preseason training camp. That's what was so impressive, by the way, about the Chiefs last week is almost no penalties, almost no turnovers. That's a sign of a well-coached team. And when you're putting in a new system, which the Chargers are, it's probably a good choice. I will say we had a new system in defense, and it took us 10 weeks last week, and then the Chiefs last year, and then the Chiefs led the NFL in scoring defense at the end of the season. So that's what's, I think, going to be different this year is our defense is still, just getting its legs, and I think it's going to continue to play well, if not even better than last year.
Nick, my boss here, Mike Holmes, goes by the name Mike the Intern, and he is a Chiefs season ticket holder and has been, and he is also. I want you to hit Nick with that.
About Tecmo Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm about almost 40, so I'm in that sweet spot of the analog and digital generation. So I played a lot of Tecmo Bowl when I was growing up.
Sweet spot?
It is a sweet spot. You know why it's a sweet spot is because I got the vinyl, I got the early 80s where you could almost kill yourself in amusement park stuff, and then I got the cool technological stuff at the same time. It's been a nice mix. I'm not going to argue with that. That's besides the point. Tecmo Bowl. I'm assuming you're aware of that, correct? You know the Nintendo football game?
My friend, I have gotten letters from people saying I'm the all-time Tecmo Bowl NFL kicker.
Dude, I'm telling you.
You kicked an 80-yard field goal.
Dude,
an 80-yard field goal for me in Tecmo Bowl. I'm like, listen, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Dude, there's no lie. It's like you are the OP kicker in that game, and it's kind of whenever you pick up Bo Jackson, you can't tackle him. You just nothing you can do. You just give him the ball and run across the game, and you win. It's unreal. But I just want to say thank you. It's been since I was a little kid seeing your name pop up on the little football guy goes across the screen and Nick Lowery, and the crowds go and it's like the 8-bit sound. Oh, so great. I hope you have a Nintendo and sometimes you just fire it up and just kick field goals every now and then.
It's just such a release. And listen, three of the great highlights of my life: the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, the Tecmo Bowl Hall of Fame all-time kicker, and a couple years ago, the Yahoo Sports all-time NFL mustache team. I mean, that's a list.
That is a list.
I did not know about that.
We're gonna have to do a little bit of investigation on that whole list and all the photos that come along with it.
That is super. Now, hey. I know you don't like to brag about yourself, but tell the audience and us here a little bit about the possibility of what might happen next year.
Well, it's very tough to make it in the Hall of Fame as a kicker, but it's been a little bit harder maybe just because I had the honor and was able to seize the opportunity to win the job by beating out Jan Stenerud, who everybody knows was the first kicker in the Hall of Fame. So I think maybe that's made it even harder because, if I'd been on another team, it would have stood out maybe a little bit more because it was just part of the tradition. And everybody thinks that I followed Jan, but I had to go head-to-head. And the person that was charting me, he was 16 years old back then, was none other than Chiefs' excellent owner, Clark Hunt, the son of Lamar Hunt. And he's the one that told his father that I would beat out Jan Stenerud. So we'll see what happens. I know that Lee Steinberg, who's Patrick Mahomes' agent, was my agent. I know he's very much believing that I should be in there. And I'll tell you what I found out, I've had a number of sports analytics clubs advocate for me and do a lot of research that said I scored 1.5 points more on average than anybody else. But the coolest thing is the St. Albans Club, my old high school data analytics club, found that not only was I the most accurate kicker in NFL history when I played, but I was more accurate than ever in the worst conditions. That is under 40 degrees and over 10 miles an hour of wind, which I didn't know. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud that last 5 years with the Chiefs, with Marty Schottenheimer, we were in the playoffs every year, and I got to kick 38 of 40 field goals in the fourth quarter. So, playing for a great coach and a great team and filling up Arrowhead Stadium as it was and will return to be, those are the greatest memories I'll ever have.
Nick, let me ask you a question really quick about the Hall of Fame. And do you think that kickers are really underrated and underappreciated as far as the Hall goes? Now, I grew up in a period, a little bit older than Mike, I grew up in a period where Ray Guy was a game changer, but is still not in the Hall of Fame. What's your opinion about that?
Well, he's in the Hall of Fame now, guys.
Oh, did he make it? I'm sorry.
It took a long time. You didn't know he was in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame, but it took a long time. It is harder for kickers. But, back when in the 50s and 60s, Lou Groza was kicking 50%, and George Blanda was kicking at 55, 60%. By the way, Stenerud was 58% in his career in Arrowhead Stadium. I was 85%. So what has really happened is, starting in the 80s, I was able to take it from an average of about 67% or 65% up to 80%, and it just continues to get better. The rules now have changed where you weren't kicking a new football, which was like kicking, a new baseball mitt, much tougher. It didn't have a lot of ply in it, and now those balls are broken in. So if you look back about 10 years ago, those balls were broken in, so everybody started punting and kicking about 5 yards farther. So the kickers today absolutely are as great as they've ever been. Justin Tucker is the greatest kicker I've ever seen for the Ravens, but Harrison Butker is a close second or third. He's amazing. So kickers are great today, but they're still not appreciated because if you look at the stats, the amount of games that are won by kickers is pretty significant, and teams that don't have a good kicker suffer the consequences.
Neither of you guys in your travels, you, Joe, or you, Mike, ever been to New Hampshire?
No.
When I was really little, so I don't remember.
It doesn't count. That's the reason that Nick Lowery is such a great cold weather. It never warms up in Hanover, New Hampshire, never. And Nick's a Dartmouth College product, one of the very few pro athletes ever to come out of Dartmouth, too. That says something. Where are you now at the moment, Nick?
Where am I now?
Yeah.
I'm 1.9 miles from my next turn, so I'm about 30 minutes away from Republic, Missouri, and Big Whiskeys.
There's the key right there, about a half an hour away. And folks, you all had the chance to meet and visit with Nick. You will talk to the folks, won't you?
He's definitely going to have someone coming up to him about Tecmo Bowl.
Being a player is you've got great fans and you celebrate lots of things, but especially now, this is such a beautiful team. I feel just like a huge fan. I mean, I love Patrick Mahomes. I've gotten to know his mom and dad. I've gotten to know Lee Steinberg again in a different way. And most importantly, the organization, the Chiefs organization, the team itself, the character of the team, the coach, of course, Andy Reid is such a big teddy bear, but he's also an incredible strategist. And I think now that he's won a Super Bowl, he's got that monkey off his back. I think he'll be an even better coach now. So as Patrick Mahomes said to me when he gave me the Steinberg D. Nicola Award before the Super Bowl, whoops, there you go, guys. Patrick Mahomes was backstage with me, and I said, let's win a Super Bowl. Now, this was, a year and a half ago, and he said, let's win a bunch. And that's his mentality. So I'm very, very excited about this team, and I think it stands a very good chance of being the first team since the Patriots 2003, 2004 to win back-to-back Super Bowls.
We are very excited to have Nick Lowery in our midst, and he will be, folks, in probably a little less than half an hour. It'll be at Big Whiskeys on Old Town Road in Republic, and this is a benefit for Mark Preby, the very courageous Springfield police officer who will be there, and Nick, you'll have a chance to meet him. A great guy, tough guy, and indeed it should be just a fabulous afternoon. Then everybody sits back and watches the Chiefs and the Chargers. I think it'll be absolutely super. We very much, hey, Nick, please keep in touch. We love having you on. You've done a great job with us, and very much appreciate your being down here.
Well, Mike Holmes, is your middle name M.A.?
You know, I don't think I think that's the first time someone's ever said that to me. You know what? I think that's the first time that someone's ever said it. But yes, what Ned said, anytime you want to come in, especially if you get through next year, we'd love to have another conversation with you about that, sir.
Let's do it, guys.
Yeah,
love it.
Real quick, settle the debate.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joe.
Drive
Appreciate it,
safe,
guys.
sir.
Hold on just one second.
Real quick, I want you to answer a question. Solve a debate for us. This Kansas City Chiefs team or the greatest show on turf? Who's better?
I think this team will prove itself to be a better team. I think that the combination of our defense now with this offense and with this running back, who if he stays healthy, this team stays healthy without question, this team will go down as a better overall team. I think, first of all, they're going to win 2 consecutive Super Bowls, I think, which will prove that point. So.
All righty.
We'll see. I agree, but I'm biased.
We're going to get some debate from Grant Wistrom, I think. I have a feeling, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hey, Nick, a million thanks, man. Buddy, I appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us.
Same
and
here, guys.
Safe travels, okay?
Thank you. Hope to see you guys there.
We are Ned Talk, and we are broadcasting live, getting close to game time. It starts, the pregame starts in about 11 minutes, so hang out with us as we broadcast live from the Cave Studio.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Got it.
Yeah, Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. Joe Westen, Mike the Intern, Ned Reynolds. Cowboys getting slaughtered right now. L.A. Rams beating Philadelphia.
Hey, at least they got started though. It didn't look too good for the old Eagles there for a second, but they're getting it moving.
21-16 is the score in the third period now. Los Angeles has the lead, but that's certainly a catchable margin right there.
So a lot of NFL action going on early. Of course, we've got the later game. What's the game tonight, Ned?
It is the Monday night game or the Sunday night game? I must admit, I don't know.
Sunday night game.
The one tomorrow night, I do know.
It's the Raiders game.
Raiders game, yeah.
We got Seattle, New England tonight.
That's right, Patriots.
Seattle, New England.
Yep.
All right, that should be a good one. Let's check in with Ned and find out about our player of the week.
This is going to surprise you guys and get some debate. You heard Nick predict the final score. He said 34-25, and I cannot see the Chargers scoring that much because I think Kansas City's defense, which has really come to the fore and has shown so much aggressiveness, I think that's going to make a big difference, and I think they're going to hold the Chargers down. Therefore, I'm going to give my players of the game, Chris Jones and Frank Clark. I think they're going to create all sorts of problems with the backfield, and I'll give the defensive players the nod this week.
Who are you looking for to have a big day today, Mike?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see the D step up big time. I don't think it'll be a nice another game where, not to say that Houston doesn't have a very strong offense, but I liked at least a week 1, week 2 going out without any preseason, knowing that the D would be able to kind of slowly going into a situation like we don't have to face Baltimore until week 3. So give them 2 games to make sure everything's good, and hopefully that'll work with this team. So yeah, not to be unoriginal, but I like Ned's pick, so I think I'm going to go with it.
I want to mention really quickly, too, Ned's Player of the Week is brought to you by Mid-Missouri Bank.
Good.
There you
Excellent.
go.
Good,
So
good.
Ned's always surprised when we're sponsored.
Missouri Bank is very proud to have Frank Clark and Chris Jones in there as the Players of the Week.
Exactly. I know it's really early, and I mean, sometimes when we have preseason football, we have things to talk about, but we've just had one game. Anything surprise you guys yet that you've seen so far in the season?
Yes. The Dallas Cowboys. They have not played the way the preseason hype had them. They get beaten by the Rams out in Los Angeles in a close game. Now they're getting run out of their own home ballpark by the Atlanta Falcons, who are not expected to be any kind of a challenge at all. Again, guys, it points out it is pro football. These are professional athletes. They all have a lot of pride, a lot of physical skills. Most of these guys, not most of them, they all were outstanding players in college. and a lot of them mature a little bit more quickly than others. But the fact of the matter remains that the parity level in the National Football League is such that it's really difficult to pick out one outstanding team. But Dallas, they have faltered at the very start, and Mr. Jones won't like that one tiny little bit.
No, especially since they spent all that money.
Spent the money on a head coach.
Yeah. I think it's been interesting. I never really believed the hype because, I mean, if you would have believed the hype for the AFC West for the last several seasons, you'd have been wrong. So, it's just one of those things where it's early. We've never been here without a preseason before. It's never happened. You're going to have teams that are young, that are inexperienced, that are going to still be fumbling around into week 4. And that's just the way it is. And it's obvious because you saw the teams that were still together are still together. And I'm just thanking my lucky stars. The Chiefs are one of those teams.
Well, Chiefs have a challenge in front of them, an early season challenge, because they take on an AFC West opponent. We're going to have the kickoff for you of that game coming up right around 2:20, 2:25. Art Haynes and Mitch Holtis. I kind of slammed their names together there and made it one name, but Art Haynes and Mitch Holtis coming up next with the pregame show. New pregame show. Sounded really good last week. I know if you guys got a chance to listen to it.
Yep.
Ned, you've obviously picked the Chiefs. Mike, I know you picked the Chiefs. I'll pick the Chiefs too and round it out. Thanks, Ned, for being with me, as always.
Always a pleasure.
Mike, thanks for sitting in today.
Big thank you to Nick Lowery for the time. It was awesome to talk to him about Tecmo Bowl. I never thought I'd have this chance.
I know. Amazing that you get a chance to talk to Nick Lowery. That's so cool. Other guys will be back in the studio with us next week. Stay tuned as we get set to start your broadcast day with the Kansas City Chiefs on the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network. It's 104.7 The Cave.